Welcome to a couple of bunkies. In the last 2 or 3 months, we had a huge renovation project with our kitchen and living room. The contractors worked their butt off on a strict deadline, and they pulled off a miracle. I can't tell you how great the finished project actually ended up. Part of the remodeling process, we needed to pick out some lights for the space. We went to multiple stores and found that chandeliers and all of these different things were well over our budget. We went to and we looked through all of what the box stores had to offer, and they were all kind of blasé. We didn't want something that was in everybody else's house. I had a handful of walnut slabs that I really wanted to make into a couple tables. I ended up having one set of slabs that ended up being too thin to really make a sturdy table, so I thought hanging a light from it would be a perfect idea. So I start the process by cleaning up the boards with a belt sander. I really love the look of the bark on the tree. I know that other woodworkers would say that the bark's just going to fall off or something like that, but I'm basically encasing this whole thing in epoxy, and I think it'll be okay. This is the largest and heaviest of the light fixtures that I'm making. It weighs about 20 pounds after the epoxy had set. I set the table saw to 45 and I chamfer each end so it looks a little bit more natural. Then I kind of round over the chamfer with the belt sander. This next live edge slab was about 8 feet, and I only needed about 4 feet of it, and I couldn't really think about putting this into a table or anything because of the big kind of a angle that was in it. So I'm going to split this into 2 and make a false live edge on the ends that I split it from, in order to create 2 lights out of this one board. And again, I have to do the sanding process, and there's a small piece where it looks like somebody had taken a chainsaw. I will have to fill that with another piece of wood. Now these next 2 boards are extremely thin. Now I'm going to cut these boards so they somewhat fit together, and then I'm going to join the boards together with bow ties. Good old Bill would be proud. I cut the bow ties out of cherry and padauk. After putting a coat of epoxy on padauk, it turns bright red, and it's well worth the cost. Now I left the cherry bow ties a lot thicker than the padauk because I wanted to use them to support the whole weight of the light. Since these are shorter boards, I wanted to get the first 2 bow ties in place by cutting them with the bandsaw, and then I can do the rest with the plunge router. Now that these 2 cherry bow ties will hold the whole project into place, I can lay out all of the bow ties on the piece, trace them out. I'm going to use the bandsaw, cut as many of these as I can, but once I reach the throat limit, I'm going to have to cut them all out with the plunge router. If you're enjoying this content, please consider subscribing to our channel and ring the bell icon. We have a premiere video that releases every Thursday that you can talk directly to me and my wife as we watch it as well. I decided to use CA glue and accelerant just to hold the bow ties into place, but they're fairly firm into the project as it is. And I create another false live edge on the ends so they don't look too jagged or too unnatural. Now I have it worked out, so the side that the cherry is thicker on is going to be the top, where I can connect the hanging elements. Now I tape up the bottom side of the project so I can do an epoxy pour to fill in these cracks. Now I find a piece of cherry in my scrap pile that works perfectly to hang the light. I set my table saw to a 45 and chamfer around all of the pieces. I usually use a crystal clear jewelry epoxy from Amazon, but I was able to get a really good deal off of Total Boat, but my Part B container was broken on delivery. I sent an email to Total Boat and they still haven't gotten back to me yet. I was able to salvage most of the Part B and put them into mason jars. This isn't a deep pour epoxy, so I had to do it in 2 stages because of the thickness. I could only put about 1/4 inch each time. Over the night, I showed the project to my wife, and she added some lines that she wanted me to adjust. So I had to recut some of the live edge parts on all of the boards. Now I had mentioned earlier about there being some chainsaw marks into these boards that I was going to have to fill. So I take some resin, cherry, and walnut, and I fill the cracks and flush trim it with my Japanese trim saw and sand everything smooth. I personally wanted to put a hatchet and lodge it inside of the crack, but having a sharp object hanging overhead as you're eating dinner didn't seem to appeal to anyone else. Now I do some touch-up sanding to some of the new faux live edges that I created on the boards. Now I pour the first coat of epoxy, spreading it with the squeegee. This first coat works kind of as a sealing coat. It absorbs into the wood and there's a lot of bubbles that come up. So I try to keep it nice and thin because I'm going to have to sand over and redo this job later. This coat is currently going on the top of the lamps. Since it's not going to be seen by anyone, I am not going to be doing as much with the top in the aspects of making it look pretty. My mother used to say, only high dust, as high as your tallest friend. So if you're my friend, you're probably shorter than me. So unless I get some taller friends, there's going to be a ton of dust on top of these. If you're enjoying this project, consider liking and subscribing. Consider ringing the bell icon so you can see our future videos. And popping any air bubbles with some heat. With my experience, you need to come down about every 15 minutes to pop any air bubbles because of the air is slowly releasing from this first coat. And don't get discouraged if you're trying this yourself. Go ahead and just sand it down a second time and put on another coat. After the epoxy sets, I can sand down the other side of the bow tie light. I remove any imperfections that I see from the previous epoxy pour. I add a layer of epoxy on the back side of this light. This side is the side that's going to be seen by everyone. Now, for some reason, the epoxy didn't set clear in this area right here, but overall, this project looks amazing. Now I do the same epoxy pour on the other 3 projects. My wife and I run a business called Bunky's Woodworking, LLC. If you're interested in having us make a special project for you, we are taking commissions on our website, bunkyswoodworking.com. Okay, so while editing this video, I had 24 hours worth of recording. I wanted to keep the epoxy pours at a slightly slower pace. Very beautiful process in this video. So instead of having a 30-minute video, I'm going to break it down into 2 videos. If you're interested in seeing how I stabilized the bark, sanded down and reapplied the epoxy, and hung them from the ceiling, and hooking up all the wiring, please check out the next video. Subscribe to our channel, ring the bell icon so you can get a notification for when it comes out. And thank you for watching this video.